So welcome to Cigar Keep, and I'm delighted to introduce you to our next guest after our first cross-Atlantic interview that I did with the great Aaron Sigmund, and I'm delighted to welcome the equally great Brian Sacawa. Welcome to our little smoking grotto of Cigar Keep, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk to you after so many years. And Aaron Sigmund's a hard act to follow, but I will do my best.
Well, you come at things from a slightly different angle, and we've known sort of each other for a long time. And for those who don't necessarily know how our paths would have crossed, could you just set up HeSpoke style for us, for the viewers who may not yet be familiar with you, but as far as I'm concerned, should be?
Oh, that's very kind of you. So HeSpoke Style is started as a men's style and lifestyle website back in 2013. If you think back almost 10 years, websites were the thing you did. It wasn't social media. We didn't have Instagram, TikTok, and all that stuff back then. So I was a 35-year-old guy at the time. I just turned 45, and I finally decided, like, I want to put some time and effort into how I dress. So what do? You go online and you Google things and you look for stuff. And at that time, 2012, 2013, there really wasn't a whole lot out there that particularly resonated with me. I mean, there were a lot of very informational sites, a lot of forums that found a certain amount of like elitism and pretentiousness. And like, if you're either know the stuff or you don't, you're in the club or you're not. That didn't really appeal to me. There were a handful of websites too that were like, if I was a gentleman in the 1920s and I wanted to learn how to dress, I would totally read those websites. But, being more modern and stuff, it didn't really resonate with me. I wanted to look like I dressed in this era. And then on the other side of the coin, there were very, what I would call inspirational sites, a lot of more trendy things, inspirational in terms of, lots of great photos, great artwork, not a whole lot of takeaway, and a lot of younger guys who, in their 20s or whatever, more trendy street style stuff wasn't really my thing. So I said, there's got to be something out there for a guy like me, just getting into it, doesn't want to have the, a low barrier to entry, like a more, a community that would embrace you. And there really wasn't. So I was like, well, I'm just going to start chronicling my own journey. And see what happens. And it was kind of like right place, right time. I approached it in a way of wanting it to be approachable and relatable to anyone who was getting into it, people who might be in the same situation as me. And it was right place, right time. It was kind of not quite the birth of menswear online, but like the whole sort of like, I hesitate to say, but like influencer kind of thing. That really started back then, and I was fortunate enough to be on the, as it was just beginning and kind of the wave was cresting. We approached it with a very, it was my journey, but I also had like a very, I'd built websites before, so I went into it with more of an SEO focus. And, as websites were the thing back then, with that kind of mindset, it got a lot of traction, it got popular. And kind of the rest is history. And that's how we actually first became acquainted, through my website. And The Rake, of course, was one of the magazines that I had to read. There's just nothing like it. There still is nothing like it. The way you present everything is just so beautiful and well written, and also approachable at the same time. So, I thank you all for that inspiration, and it's great to kind of have those paths cross in that way.
I mean, that's extremely flattering and kind of you to say. And what I'm really excited to see is that, over the years, you'll probably agree with me, because I know I've been at the Rake 8 years, but we've seen a lot of people, get involved in all this with a lot of energy and create, whether it's websites or accounts or other sort of, tributaries of this particular community that have sadly kind of drifted away and have just sort of disappeared and kind of gone away and done their own things. But you are now about to enter the sort of next phase of HeSpoke style. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about that before we delve deep into cigars?
Right. I'll also add that to me, it's very important. Another thing, not just HeSpoke style. Like I'm a musician. I come from a musical background. I've actually played for the last 20 years with the United States Army Field Band in Washington, D.C., which I don't know if you knew until recently.
I didn't
But
until
yeah,
recently. No.
I'll be retiring after 20 years. And for me, music and there's a lot of similarities between music and style. Where they're both ways to communicate with people something about yourself without actually saying anything. And they create a sense of community and bringing people together. And that kind of connection is really what it's all about. And when you say, some people have come and gone over the years, they've been in it, they've created some great content, but then like, what are they doing now? They can just kind of bounce in and out. I've always kind of kept the same sort of focus, which is creating a community of people, connecting with people, reaching them where they are. And that's sort of understanding that what it is, why do we like to wear clothes, or why do we like to do it? It's that sense of community, but also it's the power that clothing has to transform you, to make you feel a certain way, to make you feel good about yourself, to give you more confidence. And understanding that kind of thing under the thing, I think, is what's been really powerful for HeSpoke style, at least staying around for the last 10 years and certainly going forward. Going forward, one of the things that we were really excited to have launched just a couple of years ago, we actually launched during the pandemic, is our own private label clothing, made to measure clothing online. We partnered with Michael Andrews Bespoke in New York City. And Mike had been making clothes for me for the past, since I started getting into it. I went to him in 2013 to get a suit made. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to try lots of different programs, and, all have kind of pluses and minuses, but what Michael Andrews Bespoke offered was just second to none in terms of price point, customer service. But before, this made to measure thing that we were doing now, they were only offering like a benchmade garment. So basically it was like a partnership in terms of like, I had the content and the audience, and they had the infrastructure to do this. So it's just been great over the past, each season, fall, winter, spring, summer, I'll create like 12 different looks. We'll put those on the website. It's very curated in that way. People can get whatever they want, but I really like to kind of put together a curated list of things that people would have for the seasons and put that out there. But as I've, in my Army career, as I've gone, further in, had more rank, you get more responsibility. You're responsible for more people, more accountable for things and stuff. So unfortunately, over the past few years, I've had less time to focus on that, but that's one of the things I'm really excited to kind of scale up going forward now that I'm going to be retiring from the military.
That's extremely exciting. So, we look forward to seeing how that develops. But tell me about your interest in cigars and how they came into your life.
I think I hadn't really thought about that, but it's just sort of, it's part of the lifestyle aspect of menswear. And, a lot of the things I think we love about clothing and other parts of let's say like a modern gentleman's lifestyle, clothing, fragrance, whiskey, whatever that is, cigars, music, it's this pursuit of something. It's this pursuit of something and always having something new to explore and experience. There's like no end to it. And that journey is what really attracts me to those sorts of things. And cigars are certainly no exception to that rule. There's just so much to explore out there. There's so much to try, so many unique things, so many things that you keep coming back to because you love them. And just the fact that there's no end to that journey is one of the things that really intrigued me about cigars from the beginning.
Great. Do you remember what your first cigar was?
Probably when I was in high school. We smoked these things called Swisher Sweets. Those are the cigars you had when you were like a teenager in high school. So, but that's nothing to write home about. um, but I think probably the first cigar, as I do with everything, I sort of like research and like how am I going to get into it and like where do you start and like what's the progression of how you go through things. And I knew to not start too strong. I had gotten some advice that stick with some Connecticut shade wrappers or whatever, just kind of dip your toe into the water.
Mm.
So I think the first one I had was actually an Arturo Fuente short story. So not too long, very light. It was enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I still have them every now and then today.
And did you grow up with the sort of that kind of cultural impetus that was put onto Cuban cigars sort of through the embargo? I don't know if controversy is necessarily the right word, but certainly the kind of stigma and perhaps exoticness of Cuban cigars.
Exotic for sure. I remember, I didn't know about them growing up in high school until I spent a summer in Spain. I lived in the Basque country as part of a cultural exchange. It was really awesome. And some of my older friends said, "Oh, you're going to Europe. Make sure you bring home some Cuban cigars." And that was sort of my first intro to that whole world. And they were very exotic. You couldn't get them. It was hard to attain. So, over here in America, Cuban cigars definitely have a sort of intrigue to them, just simply because they're not as readily available to us as they are to you.
And do you sort of look across the pond or north into Canada and sort of feel a sense of jealousy, or do you feel like that America, or what America has in terms of its options? The number of cigars and the consumption of cigars in America is enormous. It's just that the only difference is that they're generally non-Cuban. But as an American, do you kind of look over with envy, or are you kind of happy with what's available in America?
There's some really great cigars that are not Cuban. I've always been a fan of Nicaraguan tobacco. I think it's wonderful. A lot of the cigars I smoked, like once I started getting into it, were Davidoff, and they released like a Nicaraguan line, and that was something that I really liked. But no, as I've traveled more and had opportunities to sample more Cuban cigars, I've certainly when I travel, I bring a box or two or three or more home with me, just to stock up the humidor before the next trip. But I would say, I talked about the journey of cigar smoking, but I honestly, with a lot of Cubans, I find myself really kind of focusing in on a few sticks that I know that I love. If just in my own personal smoking, usually I'll branch out when I'm hanging out with friends or traveling, and base my choices on their suggestions, because although I love a good cigar, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself like a connoisseur on your level, by any stretch of the imagination.
I wouldn't consider myself a connoisseur on my level either, if that helps. But that's very generous of you. I'm interested that the people often discuss America and they're kind of toying with relaxing the embargo on Cuba and how that could have a real knock-on effect in terms of supply to the rest of the world, because suddenly America will go wild for Cuban cigars. But from the people I speak to, including Aaron, it feels like as Americans, you kind of found the cigars you like and you're happy with them, and you don't feel the sort of need to kind of import this whole new country's worth of cigars.
They did let the embargo go several years ago, but then it was reinstated.
Yeah.
It's funny because I talked to a friend of mine who, I always like, whenever we go out and smoke, not at a shop because we can't bring your own stuff in, but I'll always have like a Partagas Series T number 4 or 5 or something like that. And he's really big into the things you can find in America. And he's like, I've had Cuban cigars. I don't, they're not all that he doesn't get it, or he hasn't had one that he liked. But yeah, so he's all about like all the little, the brands that we have here, and exploring like what's available there. So I don't know. It's interesting because I do wonder if it has changed over time. And I don't necessarily have a pulse on this, but like in the cigar community writ large in America, but like, if there will be, I mean, I don't know. I think there'll probably always be this intrigue with Cubans. So maybe at first, perhaps people would go a little crazy, and then, it would kind of simmer down a little bit and people would figure out what they liked and so on. I don't know if I did a good job answering your question.
No, I think that's a fair point. And I think you're right, is that, there will always be that kind of first level of excitement, and the markets will adjust themselves accordingly. Cuba's output will figure out how best to serve the American market. But I also do buy this argument that you can already get Cohibas, Monte Cristos in America. They're just non-Cuban, and
Right.
people may have the sort of loyalty to those and like those, and not see a need to kind of go to Cuban, in the long term. Crucially, price is a very important point,
Right.
because I think you could get cigars pretty cheaply in America.
Yeah.
I don't think Cubans would ever be cheap.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if there would be sort of like a social strata differentiation if Cubans were released in the US market like that.
It would be a very, very interesting sense of irony that a communist country coming into the market in America sets up a new social hierarchy, which is not based on sort of anything egalitarian. It's sort of but that's the luxury world for you. It kind of,
Yeah.
it's a sort of jostle for position to a large extent. And I think that's kind of what they're planning on doing with Cohiba, is setting it up as a sort of an Hermes. We also have a set of quick fire questions, which I hope to put to you to allow the viewer to get to know you better and to understand whether they can align themselves with you as a cigar smoker, novice or not. So I'll kickstart. What's your favorite cigar?
Favorite cigar, like as a daily smoke, would be, I mean, I have to say, can I have two?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Partagas Series D #4, I love. It's one I come back to all the time. I also do love the Trinidad Vicia.
Great choice. I mean, that's a very good choice. I mean, they've made it too expensive nowadays with the whole price hike, but that's a very, very good choice.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was at Edinburgh for a month in August, and I went to go get some cigars, and my friend had just got promoted to sergeant major, so I bought him a Vigia, and I was surprised at how much the price had gone up.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate why Trinidad has been sort of the target for the sort of price tag, but either way, that's a very good choice. Favorite cut?
Straight cut.
Okay. Now, would you use a guillotine or a pair of scissors, or do you have a cutter that you like to use?
I have a cutter. It's a Davidoff cutter that I use.
Just a guillotine.
But I have wanted to get a pair of scissors. That's on my list.
It is very smart when people do that. Favorite cigar accessory?
That would be this right here. This is a gold SC DuPont Line 2 that my wife got for me for my 40th birthday. I love it.
It looks amazing. They do a great job. I mean, my one, which I don't actually have on me right now, would also get that's probably my favorite too. So
I just love the way I love the weight of it. I love the way it feels. It's just such a classic look, and it's a beautiful lighter.
Do you carry on you sort of at all times, just in sort of the opportune moments of somebody needing a cigarette being lit?
I do like to do that.
That's good.
I always think it's nice to be the guy, that has the lighter.
I agree. That's very good. That's very nice. Favorite method of lighting?
Slowly. I usually use this, and I do take my time to really toast the end, to smell it as it's doing. I mean, smoking a cigar is all about spending, you know, some time, some quality time, and enjoying just the moment. So there's nothing about the process that I like that I rush at any time. So and to include lighting the cigar.
Super. That's perfect.
But I must say, as I light it, I have taken a cue from our friend Shari,
yes,
who has quite an elaborate way of turning it, and
he blows flames out endless.
Oh yeah,
constantly,
yes,
constantly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can you blow smoke rings like he can?
No,
No, nobody can.
that's impressive. That's impressive.
It is indeed. Favorite method of storage?
I have a small humidor over here. I have looked into getting a cabinet though.
Okay.
Just so I can, you know, bring home more boxes and keep them better.
And you, off camera, we were talking about using Boveda.
Boveda. That's I've just learned.
Indeed, Boveda. What percentage do you use as in terms of humidity?
69%.
Right, fair enough. Good. I've been a 70%, 73% for a while,
Yeah.
and I'm about to change to 69.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I think mine are just a bit too squidgy. Favorite place to smoke? This can be a lounge or it can be somewhere personal.
Well, my favorite place that I used to smoke was the Davidoff Lounge at Madison 53rd in New York City. So I would go there when my wife was still living, and we weren't married yet, but I was living in Baltimore. She was living in New York, and she was working at DDB, which is just a few blocks down Madison Avenue from that Davidoff. So I would go up on Fridays and we'd hang out for the weekend. But on Friday, I'd get there before she'd get off work. I'd go into Davidoff, have a cigar. She'd collect me, and we'd go out to eat and drink. And so that place always has like a real special place in my mind. But now I love. We have a fire pit out in the backyard, in the woods. It's beautiful to sit out there on a non-breezy day with the dog in the yard and have a great cigar.
That does sound perfect. And to finish it off, your favorite cigar memory?
Again, I have to go back to the Davidoff Lounge on 53rd and Madison, because they were nice enough to. Now it's a private lounge, but it wasn't before. But my friend Robert Sese, who's worked there for, I think about 30 years now, was nice enough for my bachelor party. He was nice enough to open the lounge up after the shop closed down at 9 o'clock. So we had a nice meal, and a group of friends and I were able to go to the lounge and share the moment together, have some great whiskey as well. So that's probably one of my favorite moments, just because I was able to share it with so many close friends at that, special time in my life.
Special occasion. That's a perfect answer. Terrific. Well, Brian, you've been most kind. I think I hope. Well, I certainly feel like you've elucidated enough for us to sort of be more familiar with you, and to. It's nice. It's really nice when you speak to somebody who's a cigar smoker, and you can kind of relate to your ability to kind of talk about sort of parting D4s and things, and reel off those memories. I feel like, because I've not shared the same memories, but I've shared similar, and somehow that means we've kind of been on a similar journey in that sense, and we understand the feeling, and we relate to each other. And I think that's the magical thing about cigar smokers, is that you can relate to each other really easily. But then again, you and I have also traveled a sort of sartorial path as well, that sort of has allowed us to align in multiple ways, and it's lovely to kind of connect today and talk to you. And thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, and hopefully next time I'm in London, we'll be able to. You'll be there too, and we can get together and have a smoke.
I'm almost certainly going to be here, and I absolutely insist that we do. And in the meantime, Merry Christmas.
Same to you and your family.
We will speak soon.